Story title, Shadows Next Door, Chapter 1, The Quiet Before the Storm. The town of Eldridge Hollow, nestled between rolling hills and dense woodlands, was the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. Its cobblestone streets whispered stories of yesteryears, while its quaint houses, with their gingerbread trim and blooming gardens, lent the air a comforting predictability. Here, life unfolded in gentle rhythms, measured out by the chiming bells of St. Martin's Church and punctuated by the cheerful chatter of neighbors on lazy summer evenings. At the heart of this serene tableau lived Ethan Mitchell, a typical 17-year-old whose summer days were a blend of part-time work at the local bookstore and evenings spent with Lily, his best friend since childhood. Yet beneath the surface of this idyllic life, Ethan harbored a restless curiosity, a yearning for adventure that even the most gripping books couldn't satisfy. His home was a stone's throw from Ashwood Lane, a narrow, winding street leading to the outskirts of town, where the old glass mansion stood like a sentinel keeping its secrets. The mansion, a formidable structure of faded grandeur, had always been a topic of whispered conversations, especially after the tragedy that befell its owner, Mr. Dorian Glass. Once a celebrated author, Mr. Glass had retreated into obscurity, his sorrow seemingly swallowed by the house itself. Ethan had never paid much attention to the elderly writer or his enigmatic abode until this particular summer, when a series of curious and unnerving events began to unravel. It started innocuously enough. Late one night, as Ethan lay in bed gazing out at the moonlit silhouette of the glass mansion, he noticed shadows flitting past the curtained windows like restless phantoms seeking solace. Initially dismissing them as tricks of the night or the mere imaginings of a restless mind, he pushed the thoughts aside. But when the unsettling sounds emerged, soft cries carried on the wind, the distant clanking of metal chains, Ethan found it increasingly difficult to ignore the peculiarities across the fence. The following evening, curiosity got the better of him. After his evening jog, as he took his usual shortcut through the woods bordering the Glass estate, he heard the sounds again, louder and more desperate. His unease grew, as did his resolve to understand what lay behind the mansion's imposing walls. Chapter 2. Secrets in the Soil. The rain came down in torrents the next afternoon, the sky an angry slate of swirling clouds. Undeterred by the storm, Ethan rode his bike home, the wheels spinning through puddles that peppered the road like myriad tiny lakes. On an impulse, he veered onto Ashwood Lane, drawn inexplicably toward the Glass mansion. Story. He peered through the wrought iron fence, his curiosity sharpening into a point of no return. The garden was a wild expanse of tangled vines and overgrown weeds, but what caught Ethan's eye was the patch of freshly dug soil starkly out of place among the neglect. Dark and dampened by the rain, it stood as a silent anomaly, a deliberate intent masked by apparent disorder. A chill ran down his spine, not merely from the cold, but from the unsettling notion that something lay hidden beneath those muddy depths. The following day brought yet another surprise, a second patch, similarly disturbed, compelling a sense of urgency that drove Ethan to seek counsel. Confiding in Lily was a natural course of action. With her auburn hair and bright, inquisitive eyes, she was a force of nature, her mind ever sharp and unfettered. Having aspirations as a journalist, Lily had a knack for unraveling the bizarre. "I'm telling you, something isn't right over there," Ethan insisted, his voice hushed in the safe confines of Lily's backyard, where an old oak provided shelter from prying eyes. Lily listened intently, her mind already racing ahead. "We should look into this. If there's a story hidden at the Glass mansion, it's our duty to uncover it," she declared, her resolve echoing Ethan's own determination. Thus began their investigation, a quest that would lead them deeper into a labyrinth of secrets than either had anticipated. Chapter 3. The Hidden Past. Together, they spent the weekend researching the reclusive Mr. Glass. The dusty archives of the Eldridge Hollow library revealed snippets of a life once vibrant and public. Dorian Glass had been the toast of literary circles, his crime novels celebrated for their twisted plots and psychological depth. However, tragedy had struck like a cruel plot twist. A car accident had claimed the lives of his wife and young daughter, and in the aftermath, Mr. Glass vanished from the spotlight, retreating into his mansion, a self-imposed prison haunted by memories and perhaps something more sinister. As Ethan and Lily delved deeper, they stumbled across another puzzle piece that deepened the mystery. Buried within old newspaper clippings was a series of unsolved disappearances that had gripped Eldridge Hollow decades ago. Each case had chilling similarities to the plot lines of a serial novel Dorian Glass had penned. Characters that vanished without a trace mirrored the town's own lost souls. Could his stories have been more than just fiction? Ethan pondered aloud, the idea lurking on the edge of absurd but naggingly persistent. Lily, ever the skeptic turned believer in the face of mounting evidence, mused, if Mr. Glass was drawing inspiration from real events, who's to say they weren't interconnected? Maybe these new occurrences are somehow linked. Story. Their suspicions were further fueled by the mansion itself, the way it seemed to stand apart, steeped in shadows even during the bright afternoon sun, as if guarding its secrets jealously. Deciding to get closer, they began to secretly watch the mansion, taking turns in the evening to observe any unusual activities. Chapter 4. Into the Depths. Weeks passed, each day accumulating pieces to a puzzle that begged completion. They cataloged the strange happenings, shadows that defied the explainable, movements within the derelict greenhouse, and the ever-expanding patches of disturbed earth. The night Ethan and Lily chose to act was thick with suspense, the air humid from an earlier storm and filled with the electric charge of impending decisions. Mr. Glass had departed earlier that day, a rare sighting of the man himself, a figure as ghostly and withdrawn as his mansion. Dressed in dark clothing, backpacks strapped and flashlights at the ready, Ethan and Lily scaled the wrought iron fence, their hearts pounding a synchronized beat of trepidation and determination. Inside the garden, they moved cautiously, casting nervous glances at the enigmatic house looming above them. It seemed to watch with eyes unseen, a creeping sentience in its presence. Approaching the newest patch of disturbed soil, Ethan kneeled, running his fingers through the loose earth, raising more questions than answers. Determined to uncover the truth, they proceeded to the mansion's rear entrance, a door covered in ivy, long unused but leading, they hoped, to answers. It creaked open with protest, revealing a dimly lit corridor steeped in the scent of mildew and thyme. Every step they took deeper into the mansion's bowels seemed to echo interminably, as if absorbed by its very walls. They journeyed from room to room, each offering glimpses into Glass's life, a pristine study lined with manuscripts, paintings veiled in dust, and finally a door leading downward. Chapter 5. The Maze of Mirrors. The basement was a world of its own, draped in shadows and whispering of secrets. Their flashlights revealed a room, meticulously organized yet eerie for its macabre focus. Photographs lined the walls, each face staring back with eyes both familiar and forlorn, the very people who had disappeared from town records. Lily gasped, pointing out a pattern. Dates scribbled near each photograph aligned unnervingly with the town's unsolved cases. Among the papers scattered across a work table, they found notebooks chronicling dark tales, draft after draft seemingly blurring the lines between fiction and reality. "These aren't just notes," Lily whispered, flipping through the pages. "They're confessions, twisted into stories." Her voice was tinged with a mix of horror and fascination, the journalist in her grappling with the enormity of their discovery. Story. They were caught in the grip of revelation when the soft tread of footsteps from above sent adrenaline spiraling through their veins. Ethan and Lily exchanged a glance, panic swelling as they realized they were no longer alone, and perhaps never had been. Chapter 6. Faces in the Shadows. The realization hit like a cold wave. They were ensnared in Glass's narrative, players in a perilous game, orchestrated by a mind teetering on the brink of reality. The sound of footsteps grew closer, measured and deliberate, like the ticking of a clock running out. Instinct kicked in. Ethan gestured toward a narrow storage space cluttered with boxes, a hiding spot that might offer temporary reprieve. They slipped inside, holding their breaths, hearts pounding as awareness sharpened to the slightest changes around them. From their vantage point, they saw Mr. Glass enter the basement, a figure far removed from the reclusive old man they knew. His presence was imposing, his eyes scanning the room with an unsettling calmness that belied the chaos they felt. He moved with uncanny precision, retrieving one of his notebooks and paging through it with fingers that danced lightly across the pages as if reliving the stories in his mind's eye. When at last he spoke, his voice was soft yet resonant, tinged with melancholic familiarity. To capture the soul of life is to weave narrative threads into reality. The lines blur and truth emerges. Ethan and Lily remained silent, their bodies tense, fear and the gravity of their discovery weighing heavily. Each second ticked by like an eternity, the air around them thick with unspoken danger. At last, Mr. Glass turned to leave, his departure as methodical as his entrance, and only when the sound of footsteps faded did Ethan and Lily allow themselves to breathe again. Gingerly, they emerged from their hiding place, hearts still racing as they considered their next move. The world seemed to have grown sharper, their mission clearer. They needed evidence. They needed to escape and bring the truth to light before the mansion's shadows consumed them. Chapter 7. The Escape Plan. Ethan realized they needed more than just their words. They needed proof of the horror they'd uncovered. Quickly, they snapped photos of the room's walls, capturing images of the missing persons and the notebook's incriminating pages. Their task accomplished, they began their retreat, navigating silently through the basement with every sense attuned to the slightest noise. "We need to get out of here before he realizes," Lily whispered urgently, her voice barely a breath in the oppressive silence. Story. They retraced their steps through the musty corridors, past forgotten memories and stories that might never see the light of day. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like thunder, each shadow a reminder of the malevolent presence lurking within the mansion. Back in the garden, the moon had emerged from its veil of clouds, bathing the overgrown expanse in a silvery light, a silent ally guiding their path to freedom. They clambered over the fence with newfound urgency, their hearts pounding to a natural crescendo. Once on the safe side of the fence, they sprinted through the familiar woods, the world rushing past in a blur as adrenaline fueled their escape. The boundary of the forest broke open into the town's edge, the familiar lights of civilization dispelling some of the terror that had gripped their hearts. Chapter 8. A Town Aroused. Eldridge Hollow awoke to the stirrings of its most intriguing story. Armed with photographs and a newfound resolve, Ethan and Lily approached the local authorities. Initially met with skepticism, the ramblings of teenagers playing detective, they persisted, the weight of evidence meticulously laid out before disbelieving eyes. As the story spread, the town was set ablaze with tension. Long-standing suspicions and past mysteries converged into a narrative that demanded resolution. The mansion at Ashwood Lane became the focal point, a monument both feared and pitied as it awaited scrutiny. Once a reluctant object of attention, Mr. Glass now stood at the center of a tempest he had unwittingly tailored. The reclusive writer, captured by authorities, displayed a mixture of resignation and relief, as if the burden of secrecy had weighed heavily, even as his mind danced dangerously close to fiction's edge. Chapter 9. The Truth Unraveled. Months passed as investigators worked meticulously to piece together the truth hidden within Mr. Glass's intricate tapestry of narrative and reality. The town mourned its lost souls while grappling with the disquieting revelation that their stories had been imprisoned within the walls of fiction. For Ethan and Lily, the ordeal left indelible marks, scars, and strengths they hadn't known existed. Their friendship, strengthened by the trials, became a testament to the resilience born of shared courage and discovery. The town's gratitude surrounded them, acknowledgement of the bravery needed to stand against the shadow that had lain next door. In time, the Glass Mansion was transformed from a monument of obfuscation to a beacon of memory and healing. The overgrown garden was reclaimed, the soil turned to new purpose, as townsfolk sought to reclaim both land and history. Story through it all, Dorian Glass remained a spectral figure, a man caught between worlds, perhaps the most tragic character in a narrative of his own creation. His stories, once praised, now served as a warning, a realignment of perspective inspired by his unwitting narrative, one that warned against the danger of blurred lines and the shadows that lurk when fiction bleeds into life. Epilogue. Beyond the shadows. Ethan and Lily stood at the edge of Eldridge Hollow, the landscape before them bathed in the warm glow of possibility. With summer drawing to a close, The town, once steeped in quiet, now buzzed with renewed spirit. It feels different now, doesn't it? Ethan said, glancing at Lily, the horizon stretching infinitely before them. Yes, she replied, a thoughtful smile touching her lips. Maybe we can finally put the shadows to rest. As the last vestiges of daylight faded, they turned back toward the heart of Eldridge Hollow, stepping into a future shaped by their courage and curiosity. The stories they carried within them were no longer a burden of fear, but chapters of growth, reminders of the lessons learned amidst the silence of summer. Their lives, much like the town, had been irrevocably altered, forever marked by the confrontation with darkness they had faced as mere whispers on the wind. Together, they embraced the path forward, a journey of promise and pathfinding, and the understanding that sometimes the greatest stories lie just beyond those shadows next door.